Hey everyone, are you feeling that pinch in your wallet lately? Yeah, I thought so. Prices are going up everywhere, and today we're going to unpack one major reason why.
Tariffs.
Hmm? Yeah, Trump's latest round of tariffs. We're talking a 25% hike on stuff coming from Canada and Mexico, and another 10% on everything from China. Outright.
Yeah, what's really striking here is the timing. We're already dealing with high inflation, and these tariffs feel like almost like adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah, and we've got some great articles here from the New York Post, Housing Wire, and CBS News, and they're all painting a pretty worrisome picture. The headlines are screaming about economic fallout, but we're going deeper than that. We want to figure out why these tariffs are happening, what they really mean for you and your budget, and who stands to win or lose.
Big time.
Yeah, and you can bet there will be winners and losers. What's interesting is how these tariffs could actually reshape the entire housing market, and I'm not sure it's going to be in a good way for most of us. Okay, so let's get into it. First, what's the news saying? The New York Post is calling these tariffs a deliberate and destructive move that's going to make housing even more unaffordable. Housing Wire is echoing that, focusing on how these tariffs will impact construction materials like lumber, steel, and aluminum. Remember those lumber tariffs from Trump's first term?
Oh, yeah. It feels like we're on repeat, doesn't it?
Housing Wire says those tariffs added almost $9,000 to the price tag of a new home. $9,000. Does this feel like we're heading for another housing crisis? Or are we headed for something even bigger?
Well, the scary part is how these tariffs ripple through the whole construction process. Increased costs for materials mean builders have to charge more. And guess who ends up paying the price? The person trying to buy a home.
So we're not just talking about higher home prices, but maybe even bidding wars, even higher mortgage rates. It's a recipe for disaster, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it could push that dream of owning a home further and further away for so many Americans.
Which brings up a really crucial question: who benefits from all of this? Because there are always winners in these situations, right? Housing Wire suggests that hedge funds and real estate investors are probably pretty happy right now
Fewer people buying homes means more opportunities for them to buy up properties
and
and
turn them
store.
into rentals
Yeah.
and jack up rents in the process.
It creates this cycle where everyday people are struggling to afford a place to live while wealthy investors are making a killing. This raises a really important question. Is the American dream becoming even more unattainable for the average person?
It feels like a rigged game. And speaking of rigged, CBS News is predicting that these tariffs could raise the inflation rate by a full percentage point. A full percentage point. What does that actually look like in real life?
Yeah.
What does that mean for our listener trying to manage their day-to-day budget?
Well, buckle up because this is where it gets really interesting. Rising inflation affects everything: your groceries, your gas, your utilities, even your morning coffee. It's a silent thief that slowly eats away at your purchasing power, making it harder to make ends meet.
So we're not just talking about the price tag on a house. We're talking about the increasing cost of everything you need to live in that house. Food, transportation, heating, cooling, it all adds up.
Exactly, and these tariffs have the potential to set off this chain reaction that makes life more expensive for most Americans.
It's like trying to climb a mountain while someone keeps adding more weight to your backpack. You're putting in the effort, but the goal just keeps getting further and further away.
That's a great analogy. And to understand the potential long-term consequences, it's helpful to look at historical trends during previous economic downturns. We've seen this pattern emerge. Investors with lots of money come in and buy up properties while prices are low.
So they're basically taking advantage of a crisis.
In a way, yes. This shrinks the supply of affordable homes and drives up rents, making it even harder for the average person to buy a house.
So these tariffs could actually accelerate that trend. We're talking about fewer people owning homes, more people forced into renting, and those lucky enough to find a rental are paying a premium for it.
Precisely. And this isn't just about economics, it's about social mobility. Homeownership has traditionally been a pathway to building wealth and achieving the American dream. But if that pathway becomes increasingly narrow, it has ripple effects on everything from education to healthcare to retirement.
It's like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps when someone keeps moving the bootstraps further and further out of reach. So we've got this perfect storm brewing, rising inflation, skyrocketing housing costs, and a system that seems rigged in favor of the wealthy. It's pretty disheartening.
It can feel that way, absolutely. But remember, knowledge is power. By understanding what's happening, we can start to demand better solutions. These tariffs might seem like these abstract policy decisions made in some far-off room, but they have very real consequences for very real people.
It's like that saying, personal is political. What happens in Washington doesn't stay in Washington. It shows up in our grocery bills and mortgage payments. The New York Post article actually calls these tariffs a clueless and destructive move and accuses the administration of not caring about the consequences. Is there any truth to that?
Well, it's certainly true that these tariffs will disproportionately impact working families while potentially benefiting those who are already well off. Whether that was the intended outcome is debatable, but what's undeniable is that these policies will have a huge impact on the housing market and the lives of everyday Americans.
And Housing Wire goes even further, saying that these policies are helping wealthy investors turn the housing market into a giant ATM.
Mhm.
That's a pretty serious accusation.
It's important to note that there are different perspectives on this issue. Some argue that these tariffs are necessary to protect American jobs and industries. Others believe that they will ultimately harm the economy and hurt the very people they're supposed to help.
So how do we figure out what's really going on? It feels like we're being bombarded with information from all sides.
Yeah. By examining the evidence, considering multiple viewpoints, and asking critical questions. For example, if these tariffs are truly about protecting American jobs, why are they driving up the cost of essential goods and services for American families? And if they're meant to boost the economy, why are they making it harder for people to afford a place to live?
Those are some really tough questions. It sounds like the answers might be even tougher. What can the average person do? It's one thing to feel overwhelmed, but feeling powerless is something else entirely. Where do we even start?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore right now. Because while this situation might feel bleak, there are things we can do both individually and collectively to push for a more equitable and sustainable future. Well, this situation might feel bleak, but there are things we can do both individually and collectively to push for a more equitable and sustainable future.
Okay, so what can we actually do about this? Give us some actionable steps, because I think we're all feeling pretty fired up right now.
Well, first of all, the most important step is to stay informed. Knowledge is power, and the more you understand about how these policies affect your life, the better equipped you'll be to advocate for change.
Right. It's not enough to just glance at the headlines.
Right.
We need to dig deeper, read articles from different sources, and not be afraid to ask those tough questions.
Exactly. The second step is to connect with your community. Talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors about how these issues are impacting them. Share your concerns, brainstorm solutions together. Remember, there's strength in numbers.
It's like they say, a burden shared is a burden halved, or maybe in this case, a problem
Mhm.
shared is a solution found.
I love that. And finally, don't underestimate the power of your own voice. Contact your elected officials, write letters to the editor, and engage in constructive dialogue online. Let them know that these policies are having a real impact on your life and that you demand better.
So it's about educating ourselves, engaging with our communities, and raising our voices to
Yeah.
demand change. It sounds simple, but I guess sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective.
Absolutely. Remember, you're not alone in this. Millions of Americans are feeling the squeeze of these policies. And by working together, we can create a more just and equitable society for everyone.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and thanks for breaking all of this down for us today. I think we all have a lot to think about and even more to do.
It's been my pleasure. To our listeners, I'll leave you with this final thought. If tariffs make homeownership more difficult for everyday Americans while potentially benefiting wealthy investors, what does this tell us about who these policies truly serve?
That's definitely something to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. Until next time.